Hello, everybody.
Hey.
All right, so there we go. Um, all right, so Rick, how'd your weekend go?
Oh, went pretty good.
Yeah, I think RJ went to, I guess, a convention in the Ozarks. I think I did see something on that from him on his Facebook. But
Uh,
so what did you do the last couple of days?
Played a bunch of Minecraft. Church. Was at a memorial service after church
Hmm,
for a couple friends that died a few weeks ago
uh,
or a couple months ago. One of them. Um,
it took him a couple months to do a memorial.
yeah. Well, we had one planned earlier, but then it got snowed out.
Ah,
So then we were just waiting for it not to be a time when it would snow to do it.
basically, you were waiting for the conditions to thaw out in order to do it.
Yeah, just to make sure everybody could come, anybody that wanted to. Unfortunately, well, and I'm not talking like a funeral service or whatever. Just remembering, service or gathering. Unfortunately, the family for the one individual just had a small, intimate family gathering for quote unquote
Hmm.
the funeral. So no friends or whatever were invited. Nothing for friends, and then for the other fellow, really, it was all. I don't even think there was that for that him. So you know, my church. They both went to my church, so they did a memorial for both of them
Uh,
today.
just kind of a two for one thing.
Yeah,
So you might, well, yeah, we did this, so we might as well just throw this other situation in there too.
yeah.
And go off
Well,
camera here for a moment, but I'm
but
still.
well, instead of having two, might as well do it at the same time since we were gonna do one for the one individual, and
Hmm.
we would have done one for the other one individually if we had got the other one done beforehand. I'm sure of it, but
Mhm. All right, there we go. All right, so yeah, so are you gonna be doing are you gonna be doing like do you know if you guys are gonna be doing a draw stream on Monday or no?
I don't know. I don't know what happened last
Because
Monday.
it seems like you guys you were gonna move it to Monday and then you haven't been doing it, or it seems like you haven't been doing it.
Or did it happen? Yeah, it happened. I think Monday, but late.
Uh,
Here, let me. I might be able to check. Let me see if I can get Chris's channel to see one way or another. Yeah, he did a God chat draw stream last Monday.
oh, okay.
Yeah, it was just for over an hour. So
Huh. All right. So, anyways, just checking to see if anybody tried to contact me via email, via Facebook. That's where I sent everything out to. But
yeah,
oh, hmm. Yeah, I before we get into anything like you sharing your experiences from Friday or anything
yeah,
else. I'm again just waiting to see if we see anybody else
yeah.
show up.
Seeing if anybody waiting for people to come in the chat or maybe
Mm-hmm.
in the back on the panel here. Uh,
Mm-hmm. It's kind of hard to find. I mean, I have some ideas of what. Yeah, obviously, I was kind of telling you Friday some of the stuff I might
do
bring up.
yeah.
Well, aside from the one thing I told you about the whole thing about that graphic novel of Anne Frank, one of the other things I reported on Thursday from Bleeding Full was, um, I guess, Dynamite is doing a celebration of Red Sonja, like 50 years.
Ah,
So that's been going on a bit too. Um, so yeah. So basically, and then today also. Oh, look like we have three people in here now. Hello, everybody. Um, if you can like and share the stream, see if we can get some more friendly people in here. That'd be appreciated. Also, if anything we talk about here grabs your attention, feel free to comment and or ask questions. We'll try to answer the questions to the best of our ability. We're just waiting for more people to show up before we actually get started. Um, yeah, I also know on the wrestling side of things,
uh,
Impact is having its Rebellion pay per view today, and they're actually having to crown two vacancies,
ah,
and due to injuries and just the fact she's kind of getting on here, Mickey James may have retired from the business at this point as well.
ah.
So Grant, I know you don't follow wrestling like you probably did like 20 years ago or something like that, 25 years ago.
Yeah, probably more like 25,
Yeah.
maybe even 30.
Hmm.
uh, I went to a few matches when I was in my early teens,
Mm-hmm.
but
Yep. All right. Well, we
uh,
I guess we have some people in here now viewing. So,
oh,
Rick, you want to go ahead and kind of introduce yourself, and you can feel free to share any links in the chat.
yeah. Well, I am, of course, Rick Piper of Cross Comics. Um, and you can find me here on YouTube or Twitter, almost all social media, under Cross Comics. So, just whatever social media you happen to be on, try and look me up and follow, subscribe, whatever it might be.
And as I said, if you wanted to share any links in the
Yeah,
chat, feel free to do so. Um, yeah, because let's see, you have Snowdrift, Canadian Shield, a few others coming out.
yeah, yeah. I'm in the middle. I do comic books, and I've got three out so far, and I got three more in the works. So you
I
know,
know some of you guys were also thinking about like
go ahead.
Starter and huh? What was that?
Oh, you must have broke up. I thought you stopped for a second. What did you say? You said we were thinking about something. I didn't hear for
You were
that.
as I recall, weren't you thinking about getting off Indiegogo and Kickstarter and going onto your website,
Well,
and starting up
well,
something on?
I would love to do that, but well, at the moment, I'm not sure how much. If I did something directly from my site, I'm not sure how much people would come and buy, and it's nice to have the buildup of money too when you're doing a campaign.
Mm-hmm.
Um, in my opinion.
Yeah, I've heard
Uh,
some of the indie creators are doing that rather than
yeah,
with some of the censorship issues and all that going
yeah.
on
Well, there's of course the new crowdfunding site Fund My Comic,
right.
which is, you know, there's
Have,
no.
have you been looking into that? Have you
Oh
done?
yeah, technically I have my second chance campaign for Canadian Shield over there right now.
Okay.
I haven't got much traction on it yet, but it's
Well,
then
time
again,
it's just probably something that's just going to take time. Newer things it takes a little longer because they're getting more
yeah.
established. Have you put your link in yet? Because I don't
No,
see it.
no, no, I haven't put any links in yet. What am I
Um,
gonna put in? I guess I'll just put in Twitter.
Yeah, because I was waiting to highlight it. And I'm not seeing it come up. So, like, and I think we lost somebody. Uh,
Well, we just keep going, and
yeah. All right, there we go. And just show that there. So that's if you want to contact Rick, there's his Twitter. Link to his Twitter. You can go ahead
yeah,
and go find him on there.
yeah.
Um,
And then that can actually get you to other places too.
yeah, links in the your Twitter profile to some of the other stuff.
Yeah, and when I, like if I do a YouTube video or whatever, I usually post the link there to, come watch or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes I put other pictures up. I gotta start doing more. I share tweets and all that,
Mm-hmm.
retweet stuff.
All right. So we're coming up on 15 minutes. It looks like. Well, we're coming up 11 and a half. But let's see. Shall we wait a little longer, or shall I? Cause or shall I just get going here? That's what I'm just trying to decide here. Cause
Yeah.
should I wait till the 15-minute mark, or should I just go now? That's because if I try, that'll be another 3 minutes. We'd have to wait to see if people come on and.
Yeah.
Huh. Yeah, so, anyways, but I mean, I'm sure it would. It's very easy to get sleepy on a Sunday night, isn't it?
Oh,
Uh,
I got. It seemed like a fairly good sleep last night, but I did wake up a little early, and I don't know.
yeah, I get you because sometimes I find I end up getting to bed at like 1:30, 2 o'clock, and still get up at 7:38. So, uh,
Yeah.
sometimes that can be a little tricky when that happens.
Yeah, I didn't really go to bed late last night, I don't think. I don't know what. It's got me a little exhausted. I, oh, there's the yawning.
Oh, somebody in the chat.
No, me. I yawned.
I thought you said there's Johnny. That's what I was.
No, there. I said there's the yawning.
Huh. All right, so let's see. Cause we're waiting,
Yeah.
waiting on the world to change. Yes, we're waiting, waiting on the world to change.
Yeah, unfortunately, it's changing for the worse.
Yeah, anyways. All right, well, let's see. Where are we at now? Coming up. I guess I'll just. All right, so Rick, would you like to share your so as everybody know, some of you and some of you who will be watching this on the replay, today is of course Sunday, April the 16th, 2023. This past Friday the 14th, Rick joined me as we were looking at comics that went on sale from DC Comics back in October 1939. We read from uh, Detective Comics Volume 1, Issue number 33. Um, we read from Action Comics Volume 1, Issue 19, and Adventure Comics Volume 1, Issue 44. Among the features we read included the Batman story, Batman Wars Against the Dirigible of Death, which also had the
Yeah.
another little segment in it talking about the Batman, how he came to be. Um,
which would have been his fifth appearance, if I'm right, or sixth.
Let's see,
We-
27,
27, 28,
29,
29,
30,
30,
31,
31,
32,
32,
33.
33. So, seventh.
7, but since two of those were two-parters, you'd say it's more like 5, you know, because, I mean, yeah, and the funny thing is, he became a headliner, pretty quickly, almost right from the start too. But with
Yeah.
that, we also read the Zatara feature, the Gorilla King, which back in the Golden Age, it was quite commonplace to have, you know, again, we talked about the idea of transplanting brains into gorillas. That was a
Yeah.
common meme. I guess I don't know if you want to call it trope, meme, theme, whatever. Back in those days, and then you had the Sandman meet the Face, who ended up, basically driving off a cliff and falling to his death. But anyways, so that's what
Really
we read.
faced his doom.
So yeah, so Rick, would you like to share your thoughts on what we read and
Oh.
give any commentary on what we read and what we
Well,
talked about?
I think I might have read the detective one before because I went over this sort of stuff a long, long time ago by myself. Um, I don't really remember well, but it's interesting how the differences yet the um similarities to what Batman's origin is today. There is, differences in it still.
Mhm.
You know
Well, the
how
the, the general origin is still more or less the same. That there's
yeah,
been some
yeah,
subtle difference. Like there was initially the his parents' murderer was never identified. Then it was identified as Joe Chill, and then it wasn't. Then it went back to not being identified again.
and
So
I think they're back to Joe Chill. I'm not sure, but more what I mean is, yeah, there's that part, but then him learning everything. Of course, then there's the Bat Room instead of the Bat Cave.
well, earlier on, yeah. I
Yeah,
mean, well, that's the thing too. Obviously, initially, and some people might argue that some of those early stories belong not necessarily on Earth 2, but Earth 2A, because you also had, like when you compare it, like Superman, Clark, instead of working for the Daily Planet, worked for the Daily Star in
yeah,
Cleveland, Ohio, as opposed to Metropolis. So I mean, um, they may have only started to do like some, like
yeah,
Metropolis
yeah,
and Metropolis
yeah.
and Gotham came later.
Yeah.
Um,
But it's just like for any of these things, they didn't realize how much they were going to take off, so they didn't do any backstory. But then again, most of your comics back then didn't really do any
well,
in-depth
obviously, with
backstory.
Superman, Batman, they did do some backstory. They did have origins. Of course, they
Yeah,
didn't talk about Batman's origin until the seventh issue in, as it were, and then
yeah,
Superman's origin was pretty much right there from the get go. So,
yeah. Well, what I mean is backstory. Yeah, they might have known from the beginning about his parents, Batman, but the fleshing out of like the Batcave, Alfred, all that, different things like that just come through time where they just added in,
yeah.
and sort of retcon everything.
Yeah. Well, and as I told you too,
Eh,
even though
yeah,
today he's known as Alfred Pennyworth, originally he was known as Alfred Beagle.
yeah, and I'm just saying it's interesting. Like I said, the differences like Batroom, no Alfred, you know, it doesn't say about him going to college or traveling the world to gain his abilities. It's just like he studied at home, if you will, or maybe the local university or something like that.
Oh, so you believe that all that training he did, like he didn't travel the world like he would later. like
Yeah,
it would seem to indicate later.
yeah.
Hmm.
And it didn't seem to indicate that he traveled to get it, you know?
Hmm.
So, like I said, it's interesting to see this subtle, this, yeah, he gained the knowledge, but here seems like he just gained it at home or by himself somehow, by reading books, maybe even, you know,
Hmm.
and they did make him like a genius inventor, so there's your Tony Stark,
Well, Batman's would seem to be, seem over the years to develop not into just a jack of all trades, but more like a king of all trades. I mean,
Yeah,
I think I did read an article one time a while back where
yeah,
Batman was considered like in the top five of the DC universe's, martial artist.
yeah.
Yeah.
He is a jack of all trades, and but the saying goes, "Jack of all trades, master of none." He's a jack of all trades and master of all,
Yeah, I mean,
or has become that, and even a little bit back then too. But
mhm.
like I said, it was interesting. That little tidbit, and then of course we went on to our, Sandman, not Our Man. I don't know why I thought Our Man.
Well, because in a few issues, I think it's in Adventure Comics Volume 1, number 48.
Yeah,
I think it's 48, where our man actually will make his debut appearance, I believe.
yeah.
So you're not that far off. We're in 44,
It's
so
another
you're not
four
really that
issues.
far off. But and we probably will when we get to that. We probably will read the
Yeah.
first his first story there when we
So,
get to that. But
but I think we have read a couple Sandman stuff before, or you have in
yeah,
your retrospect. Sandman, of course, he's known nowadays, but he's not quite as a popular character as he might have been back then. So I know a little bit about him, not a
well,
lot.
Sandman is very similar, and there are a number of guys who are like kind of these playboy adventure types who
Yeah,
gone like Bruce Wayne, like Lee Travis, the Crimson Avenger.
yeah.
Um,
A lot of them they copy. Although I guess Batman might have come first, but maybe they copied a bit of the formula for Batman, or
yeah,
Batman copied that
some
bit of.
people would argue like the guys like Sandman and Crimson Avenger actually got their I and I think some people might argue that they got their approach from um, the Green Hornet, because I think the Green Hornet, at least in the comics, had predated a lot of those type of characters.
Okay, so maybe even Batman sort of got that idea. Well, obviously we've heard too, Batman got a lot from Zorro, but the rich, the billionaire or whatever, multimillionaire for back then, you know,
Well, think about Batman. Bruce Wayne was we don't know exactly what his family did. We just know that his dad was a doctor of some sort. We just don't
yeah,
know what kind of doctor he was. Um, you
yeah,
know, Lee Travis, the Crimson Avenger, was a publisher, was a newspaper. I don't
yeah,
know what newspaper or magazine publisher. And then Wesley Dodds is also independently wealthy, but we don't know. Tex Thompson, who didn't don a costume till later in his
yeah,
career, at the point where we're at
yeah,
right now, he's still kind of just more in plain clothes. But he
yeah,
was, he came from Texas and therefore was kind of an oil tycoon kind of here, kind of.
yeah.
So
Now, of course, I mean it just in the real life creation of them. I know Batman was half created because to be a counterpart to Superman, or that's what I've heard. DC, had Superman, and they wanted something else as popular, and they, I think, commissioned Bob Kane and I guess Bill Finger or whatever to create,
mhm,
Batman. Not saying Batman to him, but create another character that can be as popular as Superman.
mhm.
And then that's what Batman is who they came up with.
Well, that part I hadn't heard before, but I'm sure RJ may have. Um,
Yeah. Of course, when I read this thing in a book, a little bit of a book, it was just said Bob Kane. So I'm adding in the Bill Finger because of all the
yeah,
stuff
in
that's
recent years now, they're saying that
uh,
they
yeah,
want to give Bill Finger his
yeah,
due credit.
yeah. And like I said, I think I said one other time, I'm not sure whether he did or not. I'm not to judge, like it to me, it's
Well,
just
well,
fishy.
some sources even say that Gardner Fox may have actually written some of the early Batman stories too, or may have had a
Yeah,
hand in writing some of the some
yeah.
sources. But
Yeah,
um,
yeah. For me, it's just when it comes out after the everybody's dead, and it's the families arguing about it or whatever to get
mm,
some money. It's a. My question is, how true is it? I can't prove
mm.
anything one way or another, and
Right, nobody can really prove because all the parties involved are all dead. So it's like
yeah,
you know all what evidence they may have may just simply be some old papers that people could interpret as it
yeah,
might some
yeah,
of them might have been said
yeah. And
um
of course, I'm not saying that he did or didn't. And the
right.
courts have said that he did, so not much I can do about that. It's not gonna. It's not like it's paying any of my bills. So
Right. Well, and you got to remember too, the whole idea behind the retrospect
yeah,
is to
yeah,
see how the comics evolved over time too.
yeah,
That's part of the reason why I do it. Just
yeah,
see how they, if you could, take that if you could actually get into that world and walk in step with all the characters and stuff like that, that'd be an interesting thing
yeah.
to read. So,
And then of course we read Zatara. A little bit better story than one of the last ones I read. Still a couple
well,
plot holes.
I remember the one that you did read before with you were with me was the one where he went into the other dimension, and I know you were very critical of how they did the story because basically, he just made a decision without really a lot of
Facts.
without a lot of facts or a lot of background information. It's like he just went in and said, "Okay, these people are good, these people are evil. I'm going to help the good people." And that's the gist of it all.
Yeah,
But
I have no problem helping the good people. But how do you know they're good?
how do you
You,
know? How do you? Yeah, it's like your big thing was well, it sometimes can go back to, and it goes hand in hand with what we're talking about with the Submariner too, right? Um, but when you were calling him an outright villain, in a lot of people's perception, yeah, he probably was an outright villain. But one person's villain, it could be another person's revolutionary.
yeah,
Or
but see what I'm talking with Zatara and that story that we did a few months ago, read is more the fact that he went in there without trying finding out what both sides were, if I'm remembering right, both sides were worrying about or whatever. He determined, oh, I got asked to help, and I don't even know whether this is a good side. Am I? It's like, and forgive the thing. It's like he goes to this dimension, and the Nazis ask him for help. Now he get the Nazis of that dimension. It's like, is he helping the Nazis or the Allied forces? He doesn't know. We hope it's the Allied forces that he's helping in that
well,
dimension.
it was on another world
Yeah.
that everything was happening. So,
Yeah,
um,
so he knew nothing about the politics or what anybody stood for or whatever. He just, oh, yeah, sure,
but then again, comics were still in
in
there.
the infancy. But
Yeah,
yeah,
and you didn't really have a lot of Kanan set up yet. So,
yeah. Uh, but yeah, so yeah, there was a couple minor plot holes, in my opinion, of the one that we read, but it was to be a lot better, a little bit more thought out. Um, uh, guess that's about all I can think of to say about it. So Tara is another character that he's even fallen further more by the wayside than
Well, a lot
Sandman.
of that has to do with the fact that Zatanna, his daughter, has
Yeah,
taken on more of a prominent role.
yeah,
Um, than
yeah,
now for this generation, Zatara just simply John Zatara is simply Zatanna's father, and
yeah,
Zachary's grandfather. That's
yeah.
the
And I was gonna say about that the daughter part, but even in that, he's he's taking a backseat to his daughter, if you will.
mhm,
Not that and he's supposed to be dead in the DC universe, so
mhm,
at the moment, so like I guess half of you know, it's just
mhm.
interesting to see, as you're saying, looking at this back, here's this, you know, guy wizard or
And
magician.
of course, well, what did you think? Because I had, of course, the inevitable task of trying to pronounce his spells. But how did you think of that? How did
Well,
you
not
think?
too bad. It's it's trying to pronounce words that you may not realize that you know, but pronounce them backwards. So you know, it's like seeing a whack. You know, it's like when you read the Bible and you see this whacked out name. It's like how the heaven do I pronounce that?
Mm,
Or you see a word that is sort of translated from another language or whatever,
mm,
and it doesn't quite make sense.
mm.
But you did good. But what did you think of me sort of letting people know what it was in
Yeah, that was probably I guess that was okay. That seemed all right to me. Yeah,
just in case people didn't know what he was saying, although they
yeah.
probably could have
Well,
seen the
yeah.
words on
Well,
screen.
depending upon who was obviously there, like most of the group, most of the people that's in our quote unquote inner circle would probably know because anybody who's has even a minimal knowledge of Zatara's lore would know that one of his big things was pronouncing his spells backwards.
Yeah, my thing is, how does the guy do it on a regular basis without knowing? He just does it
Well,
like
it takes a
that.
lot of concentration. I mean, yeah, I mean, I could read you kind of a notes, the weaknesses note section on
Yeah,
DC database, and they
yeah, no, no.
have that too.
But I'm just talking about if the guy were real, how you would have to almost practice saying various words backwards.
Uh huh.
Yeah, but suddenly
Yeah,
you're up
sure he
again.
did. And then it was later revealed, of course, that that many of the magicians and sorcerers in the DCU were part of a slightly more advanced version of human. They weren't Homo sapiens; they were Homo magi.
Uh, but it's just like but how do there's some words that you can practice, but that you'd be normally saying like the or what or change or something like that. But
Mhm.
suddenly you're coming up against a gorilla. How do you suddenly know how to say gorilla backwards?
Um, Ali Rog, Ali Rog, Ali Rog, or Ali Rog.
See, you're just having trouble.
Well, I mean Allirog. So Ollie, Ali Rog or Ollie Rog. You know,
Yeah.
either
I mean,
way.
he probably doesn't have to have the pronunciation 100%. Somehow the spell knows what he means. But it's just, I guess I'm just saying it's interesting that, he can have that knowledge, for lack of a better way of saying it, at the top of his head, just to change whatever backwards. say whatever backwards.
The metals.
Hey,
Metals.
Metal.
Hey, metal. Let's see. You pick up a dictionary at home and practice reading it completely backward. You'll eventually hit everything. Yeah, good point there. I know I sent you the link, metal. So if you can, feel free to hop in and join in on the conversation.
Yeah, well, that's like I said, practice. He probably practiced a lot of his words backwards.
And thank you for the like and the share, by the way, metal.
But but like I said, it's a little interesting that unfortunately he's dropped down, and his daughter. They created another character who's supposed to be his daughter to replace him, and even
Well, it's kind of
she's
yeah,
sort of top
and
tier and
now,
sort of
now,
not.
now, and I don't know if it's her son, but there's another Zatara there, Zachary Zatara. I don't know
Oh, okay.
if
I
it's
didn't
her
even know
son
she
or
had
brother
a.
or cousin or what, but
I didn't even know she had a son, or that there was another
I
one.
wasn't sure either. But I know there's a Zachary Zatara, so.
Uh,
But that's again a lot of new Canaan too. So, um,
yeah. Actually, Metal, you wouldn't hit everything. You wouldn't hit people's names.
yeah, like Kusur or Ekim or Seek
Eek.
SI8 or oh, here we go. Hey metal. Hey metal.
Hello. Correction.
Huh.
You would every name, but a lot of the examples and dictionary definitions do have people's names in them.
Yeah.
Yeah, true.
Anyways, metal, you're here now. So if you'd like, want to do an intro, kind of introduce yourself to everybody, and you can share links in the chat as well to let people know where they can find you.
Yeah. I'm the metal. I create X Dinos Chaos, but more specifically, I'm working on EDK Magazine, which is going to be a Kickstarter, not Kickstarter, a crowdfunded project. I'm going to end up using what's it called?
Fun My Comic.
Comic when it comes out. I'm just so used to calling all crowdfunders Kickstarters, just because that's like that was the big one when it started. But yeah, I'm gonna make
become the generic term for them.
Yeah, but I'm gonna make a 96 page magazine, like a full length magazine. 100 if you count the covers inside and out. And I have a link where people can read up more on that and fill out the reader interest survey, which actually lets you help decide which stories are going to be in the magazine.
Yeah, and it's a short survey to fill out. It took me only like 5 minutes or so, if that.
Yeah, you do have to use your email for the survey, but the good news about that is too, if you say you are interested in it, I can use your email to add you to a mailing list so you know when it goes live.
Yeah. And this is probably going to take you a month or two at least to put together, right?
Oh yeah. I'm definitely in the planning stage. It's gonna take a bit.
Yeah.
But I'm gonna keep people updated. People can actually donate or if they want. I've got basically an early bird thing going on where if you even just throw as little as $5 at it, your name will be in the special things section. You'll get a digital version of it no matter what, even if you don't back the physical, and you'll get like a private newsletter that only the early bird supporters get.
All right. Well, there's the link right there. And if you're seeing this on replay, you can check that out as well.
Yeah.
So, anyways, all right. Well, yeah. What we were talking about, metal was, Rick was my co-host this past Friday. We were talking about, some of the material we were going over, with Batman, Zatara, and Sandman. So, long before Neil Gaiman's Sandman, mind you. So, all right. Well, we have 3 people.
And I'm assuming also before Zatara had a daughter.
Yeah.
this was long before you had a daughter, and even before Zachary. Now, I'm not sure Zachary is Zatara's son or cousin or what, but long before that as well. So,
Yeah.
anyways, with all that, we have 3 people in here now, so maybe. So we just went over. Rick, was there anything more you wanted to say about your experiences before where we kind
Not
of
that
moved?
I can think of at this time. So
All right. Well, I covered an interesting story the other day that I wanted to get your guys' thoughts on. Now, granted, it's going to be a little controversial because I was telling Rick about this. I don't know if you'd heard about this too, Metal. There was a graphic novel done about the Diary of Anne Frank.
I'm familiar with it. I've never seen it though.
You've heard a little bit about it, right?
Yes, I know that it exists.
Yeah. So basically, there was a conservative group, Moms for Liberty, in Florida, Florida, who got the graphic novel basically banned from the school, some of the school district's library they belonged to, because basically feeling that it was age inappropriate. So I'm gonna pull up the article here and we can go over it and talk about it. A lot of the controversy over a lot of the controversy over.
okay.
Oh, were you about?
I was just gonna say, do you know what age for it, or do you think did it say in the article?
It really didn't say in the article. I was thinking maybe they basically just banned the book from, I think, all the schools in the school district. But I have the article pulled up now, so
Okay.
I'll
I just wasn't, and some of, I think, knowing what age group it was being in and what age group they got it banned from, I think, you know, really helps in, sort of
yeah.
coming to.
Well, basically, it was, and I think the author of the graphic novel was Ari Folman,
Uh,
and you can see the headline right there from Avi.
yeah.
But basically, big part of it was, now, one of the other things I had heard about too in regards to this, there has apparently been some kind of movement because of certain passages from Anne Frank's diary, the one that actually got printed up. Some that were edited out, that were initially taken out in the original Dutch publication of it, about her basically nascent sexual development, and people were trying to turn her, because of some of these certain things that were said in her diary, trying to make her into some kind of lesbian icon. That seems to have been a movement going on for a while. But anyways, let's get into this. So, Anne Frank's legacy trashed with sexually explicit graphic novel, article by Avi Green, published back on the 12th, which was Monday. Now, I kind of debated actually doing this, but then I eventually just went with it. So here we go. Robert Spencer at PJ Media pointed to a truly atrocious attempt by leftists to frame conservatives for supposedly trying to censor a graphic novel about Holocaust victim Anne Frank, which appears to be written to suit the twisted leftist vision of LGBT ideology. Now that's obvious. That's obvious. That's the writer of the article speaking. This, I
Yeah.
guess, is an excerpt from, I guess, the article he's referring to. So, leftists will tell you patriots are a bunch of book burning neo Nazis who are busy even now trying to control what people think by taking books out of the hands of our young people who are thirsting for knowledge. And so the headline of the Wednesday report from Tampa Bay's WFLA was downright ominous. Quote, Florida school district removes book about Anne Frank from libraries. Unquote. Heavens to Betsy! Even Anne Frank? Do these right wingers want another Holocaust? Will they stop at nothing? And in bold here they say, but the truth, as is usually the case with establishment media reports, was quite a different matter. WFLA's lead paragraph is just as misleading as its headline. Quote, a book about Anne Frank was removed from a Florida school library after a new policy was approved, unquote. What was removed was not her famous diary, but a graphic novel entitled Anne Frank's Diary, the graphic adaptation. In this case, graphic is used in both senses of the word. Okay, so
well, even the headline says a book about. It doesn't say Anne Frank's diary, but probably most people would just automatically think her diary.
it was the actual diary that they had banned, and
Yeah,
not this graphic novel. And now the idea I would get from that statement, the graph, basically meaning they're giving real personal graphic details about Anne Frank herself that don't really.
yeah,
Now, as we go on with this article too, one of the things because I covered this on Thursday, one
yeah,
thing I noted was I thought that okay, this was probably not a great graphic novel to begin with because not that I read it or anything like that, but just you would think that considering the time and circumstances she was in, the stuff that they're trying to push here in this graphic novel, I just don't think would have been a huge thing. And in fact, I was talking to a friend recently where he was even talking about because
uh,
one of the points I had made earlier about how some of these leftists are trying to turn Anne Frank into some kind of lesbian icon, right? You remember me saying that, guys, a few minutes
yeah,
ago? I just, considering the time and circumstances, I just don't think any of that would have been that prevalent on her. Plus, considering again the time and circumstance she was in, that would have been like if she started coming out as a lesbian, it would have been like putting another bullseye on her back in a way.
yes.
Timothy's
So,
here.
hey, Tim.
Yo, how's it going?
All right. Well, before I
Good.
continue my article, before I continue the article and the discussion here, Tim, would you like to introduce yourself? Tell everybody who you are and share any links if you'd like.
Sure. My name is Timothy Olson. I am the creator of Melvin. Melvin number 3 will be launching July 29th, Pacific Daytime, as it was listed. And I will be doing Author Palooza May 20th at the Middleton Library.
All right. And I don't know if you have any links, but if you do, feel free to share them. We're going over kind of another censorship article, but it's slightly different from the one we went over last week. I don't know if you'd heard about it.
Oh God, we already have a pretty good a pretty good rating, not censorship, a pretty good rating system. People just need to learn to actually pay attention to them.
Well, this is a little different than because this is actually about a group in Florida, Moms for Liberty, that got a bunch of books banned from a Florida school library.
For what?
It's slightly different than the one we did with Ethan, but also just the material too here. But
Yeah. Well, what Mike has said with the article before we have gone over much of it is, well, it's a book about Anne Frank, and apparently it's supposed to be a graphic novel that is truly graphic
Well,
in
yeah.
more senses of the word than others. So the question is, should it be in a school where kids can get at it? And well, then the question is, how graphic is it? Which we're about to supposedly find out.
Well, I mean, on one hand, it's not some like pornographic, gay sex book like they've been like schools have been getting away with.
Well, that's
Yeah,
apparently what it might
I think
supposed to be.
actually,
What?
in the article here they do say it's actually marginally. Well, I'll when we get there you'll see for yourself. When
I can't believe what I'm freaking hearing here.
I can.
I know you can, but my brain's like, what?
Well, here let me read more of the article, and then you'll get a better understanding of what's going on here. Okay. So let's see.
We're in one graphic scene. by
Yeah,
the way.
I know. Okay, so quote, in one graphic scene in the book, unquote, WLFLA informs us, quote, Frank asked a friend to expose themselves to one another, unquote. And I remember what I was getting to before too. One of my friends was telling me that Anne Frank actually had a crush on her local mailman. So that's to the whole. But anyways,
And actually, there it says Frank asked one friend to expose themselves to another. Well, one friend could be male, the other friend female.
well,
Was that even part of the actual book, or did they just throw it in to be gratuitous?
I think they threw it. The idea here that this book that we're talking about is not the diary itself. It was titled. Let me go back to Anne Frank's Diary: The Graphic Adaptation. It was a graphic novel that was written by a guy named Ari Folman back in 2018. And basically, the reason it's in the news now is because it is one of the books that got banned from a school library. So, but anyways, in another quote, Frank walks along nude statues that are sexually explicit, unquote. The
Okay,
book,
I just want to say one thing about this. Back in that time, they had a lot of the Da Vinci busts or whatever, statues and all that. So that could have easily been something like that.
well, let me read more of
Yeah.
the
Okay.
paragraph here, and then
Okay.
you'll probably get better. So the book also portrays Anne Frank as a budding lesbian. The caption on the page where she walks among the nude statues is, quote, I must admit, every time I see a female nude, I go into ecstasy. If only I had a girlfriend. It was this marginally pornographic book that was, quote, was removed from school libraries in Indian River County, unquote, after complaints from a group of parents.
Was that wasn't even in the actual original book, was it?
Nope. I don't believe it was, because I think I don't know if you guys did in high school, but I read, I think it was part of a curriculum back then, back when I was growing up, when we were all growing up, that was part of the reading that they had you do, the Diary of Anne Frank. And I don't remember any of this stuff in it. What this apparently, as they explain further in the paragraph in the story here, apparently this is coming from certain excerpts of the diary that were originally edited out when it was originally published in 1947, the Dutch publication of it, where it was where they took certain things out of context, I guess. It was, she's a 12, 13, 14-year-old girl, obviously, in her writing in her diary here, and probably obviously exploring her her sexual development, as it were. But I don't think any of this was even maybe in it. But so moving on with the article here, the parents group in question, Moms for Liberty, by the way, not only did they get this book banned, but from what I heard, they also got Assassination Classroom banned from the school library as well, which is a manga, by the way, for those of you who don't know.
They're always trying to ban manga.
Yeah. Of course, has no problem with the real Anne Frank book In other words, the actual diary. Jennifer Pippin of Moms for Liberty explained, quote, "We think true history absolutely needs to be taught. The Holocaust, the Anne Frank diary," unquote. And Dr. Kira Shaft of the Indian River County School District pointed out that the real diary of Anne Frank is still available in school libraries there. You see, here's my whole thing about the whole argument about the idea of some people out there trying to turn Anne Frank into some kind of lesbian.
Question. Hold on.
Let me get my point across here. All right. My issue I have with that aspect of them trying to turn her into a lesbian icon over a few misinterpreted passages is that, considering the time and circumstances she was in, I don't think her budding sexuality was really a huge thing when taking into consideration she was in hiding because people wanted to kill her for just simply being a Jewish girl.
Question: was it in the book?
And the idea of her possibly also being this quote unquote budding lesbian, that would have just been putting another bullseye on her back.
My question was any of that stuff ever in the book? And if not, then why is it there?
Well, apparently.
Also, wait, hold on. What article is this in?
Well, this is a Bleeding Full article that I'm reading from, and this is, I guess, from the WFLA report.
WFLA.
So, since we have a couple of new people, maybe I'll just start over again with the whole article, just so to help. I'll just read through it real quick again, and then Tim, you can just so some of your questions can be answered, because I know you kind of came in after we had already started. So, okay, so here we go. Robert Spencer at PJ Media pointed to a truly atrocious. Now, the article here, by the way, Anne Frank's Legacy Trash with Sexually Explicit Graphic Novel by Avi Green, published on April 12th of this year. So, Robert Spencer at PJ Media pointed to a truly atrocious attempt by leftists to frame conservatives for supposedly trying to censor a graphic novel about Holocaust victim Anne Frank, which appears to be written to suit the twisted leftist vision of LGBT ideology. So that's Avi speaking. Okay, so now we're getting into the article, I guess, from Robert Spencer here. So leftists will tell you patriots are a bunch of book-burning neo-Nazis who are busy, even now, trying to control what people think by taking books out of the hands of our young people who are thirsting for knowledge. And so the headline of the Wednesday report from Tampa Bay's WFLA was downright ominous. Quote, Florida school district removes book about Anne Frank from libraries, unquote. Heavens to Betsy, even Anne Frank? Do these right-wingers want another Holocaust? Will they stop at nothing? But the truth, as is usually the case with establishment media reports, was quite a different matter. WFLA's lead paragraph is just as misleading as its headline. Quote, a book about Anne Frank was removed from a Florida school library after a new policy was approved, unquote. What was removed was not her famous diary, but a graphic novel entitled Anne Frank's Diary, the graphic adaptation. In this case, graphic is used in both senses of the word. Okay. So, in one graphic scene in the book, unquote, WFLA informs us, quote, Frank asked a friend to expose themselves to one another, unquote. And in another, quote, Frank walks along nude statues that are sexually explicit, unquote. The book also portrays Anne Frank as a budding lesbian. the caption on the page where she walks among the nude statues is, quote, I almost admit every time I see a female nude, I go into ecstasy. If only I had a girlfriend, unquote. It was this marginally pornographic book that quote was removed from school libraries in Indian River County, unquote, after complaints from a group of parents. So that's kind of the background there of what's going on here. And then
Yeah, but I think he was more asking about the original book itself, I believe, right, Timothy? Tim?
You say that again?
You were asking about the original book itself, whether it had these
Yes.
passages in. And
Yeah,
according to what I
and
got from Mike earlier, is in I think it's original Dutch that it was written in, because that's what Anne Frank was. I could be wrong.
Right.
That when they did it originally, they supposedly took a couple lines out. Is that what you said earlier, basically?
yeah, but from what I understand, it even says more about it in the article here. But basically, when it was okay, so originally the Diary of Anne Frank was originally published in Dutch, and they had actually taken out some of, there were some lines that were taken out, and according to some of the sources, those lines were talking about, obviously what a lot of, basically a prepubescent young girl, and the idea of, coming into womanhood, basically, but they're trying to take some of those little things that were some of those little comments that were in the original book and try to make more out of it than it was.
Or in her diary that were not printed.
So, but a lot of this stuff, like the caption of her walking through a bunch of nude statues and saying, "I wish I had a girlfriend." I don't know. I don't think that I don't remember reading that in the original.
Yeah, but the question is then, was that actually in her diary?
No, I think what this is somebody taking creative liberties, as they call it.
So does that answer your question, Tim? Timothy?
Yeah, I was just cross-referencing it with a USA Today article, which pretty much says the same thing.
Yeah.
Okay.
Anyways, so
the parents group.
The parents group in question, Moms for Liberty, of course, has no problem with the real Anne Frank book. In other words, the actual diary. Okay.
Yeah.
Jennifer Pippin of Moms for Liberty explained, quote, "We think true history absolutely needs to be taught. The Holocaust, the Anne Frank diary," unquote, and Dr. Kira Shafty of the Indian River County School District pointed out that the real diary of Anne Frank is still available in school libraries there. Kristen Maddox, a spokesperson for the district, said that the graphic novel, on the other hand, was, quote, "not age appropriate," unquote. So by that, maybe like now where I could see it, if they had it in, let's say, the middle school and elementary school, then I would say, yeah, I would agree, probably not age appropriate. High school, juniors and seniors should probably be, if they want to, I think they would be okay with it, but younger than 17.
The issue should also be that they're just envisioning history, which they always accuse the right of doing. Or
yeah, it's kind of funny because at least from some, based on some of the things I've read and seen recently, it's almost like they're trying to erase Anne Frank's Jewish heritage and replace it more with a lesbian heritage.
I didn't even know lesbians had a heritage.
I think you know what I mean, Tim.
Yeah, I know.
It's a whole idea of them trying to turn her into a lesbian icon. That's what I was going.
Okay, Mick, even if she was a lesbian, which none of us, I think, here think she was.
Well, you can't verify.
Yeah. What's more important at this point? The fact that she was Jewish being persecuted because she was Jewish, and that's why she would have been persecuted by the
Mhm.
um what you
Well,
call it, the
let's be
Nazis.
let's be
Let Rick finish. Let Rick finish.
Yeah, which
sorry.
that's the real reason she would have been persecuted or hunted down, because she would have kept that secret enough, I think, if she was, that nobody would have known, especially not the Nazis. So
Yeah,
they're
exactly.
focusing totally on the
Right. That was kind of my point I was making earlier too. I mean, this doesn't really seem like it's something that it's not as
yeah
whether or not she was a lesbian isn't as big of a deal as the fact that she was a persecuted young girl
yeah.
and having those experiences. Metal, were you about to say something?
No, not really. I
Okay,
don't have too
Uh,
much to say on this.
yeah,
Tim, Tim was gonna say something before.
Well, I said let's not forget that the Nazis did kill homosexuals as well, but
yeah,
there's nothing.
I made too.
There's
They
nothing.
would also have to know she was a homosexual.
You're right.
Yeah, which is sort of what I said a couple seconds ago.
I was
It's
also
kind
going
of
to.
the point I was making too earlier.
Yeah.
I
Sorry,
was.
Tim.
I was also going to say that you can't verify whether she was one or not because why is that even important?
Yeah. Well, the other thing too, as they said, the book in its graphicness, in other words, what it was showing in the pictures, because it was a graphic novel, was too graphic. The book isn't removed because of the possibility of saying that Anne Frank was a lesbian. It's removed because the pictures in it are too explicit.
Oh, you can't tell them that anyway. I mean, there's certain people I could try to tell them, hey, they go by Anne Frank was pulled from the library instead of like looking deeper into it.
Yeah. Which I think again is what the point of this article too,
Yeah.
Tim. Anyways, continuing on here, she added, "quote That's not the actual diary of Anne Frank. It's a fictional novel that has some inappropriate content in it." Unquote. It was removed, she said, "quote due to minimization of the Holocaust." Unquote. Echoing Shaft, Maddox concluded, quote, "Library spaces in the district currently have factual accounts of the Diary of Anne Frank." And again, that was one of my points too that I do kind of agree with, is that it was removed more for the minimization of the Holly. In other words, not Tim, but Rick, you were alluding to it. I've alluded to it. The idea is I don't really think whether or not she was a lesbian is really a bit as big of a story here is the fact that she was a Jewish girl being persecuted. And I don't really think she would have made that too publicly known, because that would have been like putting another bullseye on her back.
Yeah. Well, a diary's supposed to be private too, so I'm not saying that. So that isn't
And
making.
they're going to talk a little bit about that aspect too here. But anyways,
Yeah.
back to Avi here. The guy's writing the main article. Writer behind the graphic novel, Ari Folman. He's a leftist who once produced an animated quote-unquote documentary titled Waltz with Bashir about the 1982 Lebanon War, and through it told exactly the kind of angle the far left would want to hear, including the leftist New York Times. So, and this might be an excerpt from that article. Ari Folman has. Oh, were you about to say something, Tim?
No. No, I don't think so.
No, I didn't say anything.
I thought I heard you.
I sort of did myself.
I do apologize for interrupting, though. So my apologies.
No problem. Hey, you know how I feel. As long as we have a good conversation, I don't mind. As long as we're just like, if it's getting to where we're getting too personally, then I'd mind. But as long as we're like communicating here and we're having a good discussion and we're kind of,
It's just It's just
Yeah.
another case of the left lying about history. They did
Yeah.
that with the Woman King, and now they're doing that with Anne Frank.
We're gonna talk over each other accidentally because this is the internet. Delays.
So with that, then, Ari Fullman has brilliant blue eyes and a weathered face. This is the face you see in quote Waltz with Bashir unquote. This animated feature documentary, the Israeli filmmaker, even at 45, looks like a man who could stop bullets, but he could not. The story he tells and the cinematic style he tells it in emerged from the hell of war. In 1982, the Israeli incursion into Lebanon led to the massacre of Palestinian refugees at the Sabra and Shatila camps. The Israeli troops stood by and let the Christian phalangist militia kill off the Palestinians in the camps. The film that Fullman made is about the trauma. It is so. This, I guess, from the New York Times article. I'm guessing it is the story of a generation, the early '80s teenage Israelis who left their rock and roll dance halls, roared off to war without a pang, and then resumed their lives. So, what do you think of that perspective, guys?
Well, I don't know too much about that war, so it's hard to comment
Well,
a
I
lot.
think we were all still kind of young at that. I was like about 6 or 7 at that
Yeah.
point.
Early '80s, I had to have been like under 5.
Yeah, so
I was like 9 or 10 in '82, depending on what. Well,
I kind of wonder. It sounds like it's kind of slanted to that person's point of view, like heavily.
well, I think that's what Avi, the original writer here, was, or the writer of the article that we're reading here was saying. I think that was his big point there. Just taking care of something real quick here. All right. Anyways, getting back to the article here. Then, so here they're taking a one-sided position and narrative that was hostile to Christians and made it look like they were the aggressors, not the Islamo-fascist of the Hezbollah, who persecuted Christian inhabitants of the now largely devastated country. So that's Avi giving his point on what was just written. I think, and
yeah.
I thought maybe somebody was about to say, or is that you burping, Rick, or something like that?
Yeah, something like that.
Gross.
Okay. It happens.
It wasn't really a burp. It wasn't a hiccup. I'm not sure what it was.
It was just a noise that got my attention. So
It was
and
Rick's
as
body
always, if
telling
there
him
are
he needs
people
to
in the
go for a
chat,
jog.
if anything grabs their attention here,
Ouch.
feel free to comment or comment or ask questions. Metal, I'm sorry. I think I just talked over you. Did you have something to say?
Oh, I just said it was Rick's body telling him he needs to go for a jog.
Yeah, it was Metal making a joke at my expense.
All right. Well, anyways,
Mission accomplished.
Hezbollah, which means Party of God in Arabic, is a terrorist organization based in Lebanon. The Shiite Muslim group, which is backed by Iran and Syria, advocates the destruction of Israel as their primary goal. Now, for those of us who are Christians, we know that there have always, between Islamic, Muslim, and Judeo-Christian, there's always been, going all the way back to Isaac and Ishmael, there's always been that animosity there.
Yeah.
Okay? Going all the way back to Isaac and Ishmael. So, anyways, its first manifesto, released in 1985, called for the establishment of an Islamic republic in Lebanon, and stated the following with respect to the Jewish state. Quote, our struggle will end only when this entity, in brackets Israel, is obliterated, unquote. The group emerged during the Lebanese Civil War after Israel invaded Lebanon in 1982. Here's a brief history of what happened. During the 1970s, the Palestinian Liberation Organization, PLO, carried out hundreds of attacks into Israel from Lebanon. Meanwhile, the new wave of Palestinian fighters who were recruited to Lebanon by the PLO upset the balance between Muslims and Christians in the country. This led to a civil war there in 1975, the year I was born. Lebanese Christians looked to Israel for support in confronting the PLO's growing presence and ultimately hoped to drive them out of the country. Israel, hoping to stop the terrorist attacks coming from the PLO, began backing the Christians in the Lebanese Civil War. In 1982, Israel, under the leadership of Prime Minister Menachem Begin, invaded Lebanon, allying with the Christians against the Syrian-backed PLO. This began the 1982 Lebanon War, also known as the First Lebanon War, or Shalom HaGalil, Peace for the Galilee, in Israel. I'm going back, I guess, to Avi's perspective.
The Avi Green's perspective.
Yeah. It's no surprise the New York. So that I guess was from a New York Times article. Maybe no surprise the New York Times would blur this history, and Fullman regrettably provided them with exactly the kind of cunning liberal anti-war voice they wanted to hear, which is equally reprehensible. Today, of course, the war in Lebanon was sadly lost since now we've still got considerable problems with the barbarism caused by the Hezbollah. And all the while, men like Fullman couldn't care less what happens to what's left of their Christian populace, which such leftists view as expendable compared to the religion of peace by contrast. Now this may be, I don't know.
That might be a page out of Anne Frank's diary.
Yeah. And then Fullman has the gall to produce something which sadly seems motivated by PC mentality, telling exactly what liberals would want to hear in a very gross manner. Seriously, that's appalling. Now, if it matters, I also found this JTA article on the Israeli news about the topic, which states, so this is from the JTA article. The graphic novel adaptation of the diary was released in 2018 with the full authorization. Oh. Did somebody want to say something?
No.
Okay. With the full authorization of the Anne Frank funds. Adapted by Israeli filmmaker Ari Folman and illustrator David Polanski, and intended for young readers. Now, of course, we don't know exactly what, because they're not specifying here, what do they mean under 18, under 15, under 10? You know, we don't know exactly what they mean by young readers there, but the book...
Probably under 18, I would say. And it seems that the book, this had the authorization of Anne Frank herself. I would take Fonz as her married name.
You mean authorization?
Well, okay, hold on. That was not her married name because she never got married, Rick. She died in 1940. She died in 1945 of typhus.
Okay.
At the age of 16.
The question is, did an organization representing, I guess,
I
And
guess
so-
Fonz in this case is that Rick it may be an organization did give the full authorization of this, albeit they may not have known what he intended to do with it.
well, that's the question. Were they fully aware of what he was putting in the book?
Yeah.
But anyways, let's continue on with the article.
Fonds is German for fund, so it is a foundation.
Well, that's the question. Did this foundation know exactly what was being put in the graphic novel?
I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, most charity foundations these days, especially in Germany, kind of lean that way. So,
the book compresses Frank's actual diary entries into a condensed version of her true story. While it does contain some invented dialogue and surrealist scenes, as we've noted, reproductions of Frank's actual diary in the book hew to her exact words. The graphic novel has attracted some scrutiny for reproducing passages of Frank's diary that had been edited out of its original Dutch publication in 1947. The diary was first, in parentheses here, the diary was first published in English in 1952, unparenthesed. Those passages relate Frank's latent feelings of attractiveness toward another girl and her description of her own genitalia. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean, though, that she was a budding lesbian. That may have just been simple curiosity for that age, but Anne's father, Otto Frank, restored the former passage for the book's 1952 English edition, while the latter was not restored to the diary until the 1980s. Another Florida parent in a different school district has told JTA they filed a request to remove the graphic adaptation because of objections to these passages.
A note too: Otto was the one who founded the foundation, so I think it's still actually in the family, just obviously through different branches since she couldn't carry it herself.
Right. Well, she passed away in 19.
Yeah, she obviously couldn't carry herself, so it's like it went through cousins or whatever are the people who took over the foundation after Otto.
Yeah, Otto was of the so the Anne Frank's family, her immediate family, consisted of her father Otto, her mother Edith, and herself and her older sister Margot. Okay, her father was the only one who survived the war. And
yes,
he lived to be like 90 years old.
And that's part of why he made the foundation, and then it went through other family after him.
Yeah.
Question.
Oh, go ahead.
So, since these are based on passages that were taken out, does that change things, though?
What do you mean?
Or did they take those passages and embellish them?
Okay, my guess is that they took those passages and probably embellished them, because let's go back up a sec to what we just, as soon as I pull this back up here. Let's go back to okay. Those passages relate Frank's latent feelings of attractiveness toward another girl and her description of her own genitalia. So what that tells me, that's maybe just simply the curiosities of somebody who's basically becoming a woman at that point. I don't necessarily think that actually means that she was a budding lesbian. Okay.
And the question could be is, without reading the passages, attractiveness how? As a friend, doesn't mean as a lover. There's ways that you could be attracted to people.
That's a good point there, and that's something that kind of went over my head too.
I also don't think any of this actually matters. I think, But the real solution should be is there are two versions. There's the redacted and the unredacted version. If the redacted version of the original book is appropriate for school, then that should be the only version that you can adapt for schools. But you can adapt any version any way you want. It just has to be in a place that's appropriate for the audience.
Or the unredacted
Yeah,
version could
yeah.
be available upon request. In other words,
Well, I
you have
just
to,
shouldn't think it probably shouldn't be in school libraries, but if you want to
Most
get your
likely.
public library, you
Yeah.
could probably put it there.
Yeah. I think one of the big issues here with this too is as Tim pointed out, is kind of the revisionist history of them trying, them trying to use these passages as some form of justification or some kind of proof, like, oh, she's a budding lesbian. When when I think that in the grand scheme of things, it probably is not as big a thing as this guy like Fullman and guys of his ilk, probably want to make it, because again, she's relaying her experiences in part of being somebody who's in hiding from a people who want to utterly destroy her for being Jewish. Okay.
Yeah.
And
Well,
if she and even if you want to take the side of their argument, oh, she was a budding lesbian. First, I don't think she would have been too keen on the idea of making that well known, because, as Tim pointed out as well, as we all know, they weren't just killing Jews; they were also killing homosexuals. That's like putting another bullseye on your back.
Yeah,
So,
but like I said, this is supposed to be your diary. It's supposed to be private. It's not now. And I was going to say, just because you describe your own genitalia, that again has nothing to do with how whether you're lesbian or straight or
whether you're
whether.
straight, gay, lesbian, or what have you, yeah. I mean, you know,
So you know, you got to know her reasoning behind writing stuff. You know.
well, yeah. I think this is a case where the writer
Yeah.
decided to run with it, take quite a huge creative liberty with the material. Excuse me, by the way.
Well,
Anyways,
so this is actually just the problem with estates and how copyright and trademark and even just like information works. So the foundation is basically the Frank estate. That's all that's left of it, right? Anything that belonged to Otto, since he founded it, is left in the foundation, and they're okay with it. I'm not saying that's correct for history. Yeah, they can choose to revise history, and this is a problem we're just seeing with books across the board, is that estates have full control over the information in a book and can even choose to change it anytime or approve other adaptations, which it does seem like the foundation have approved this, whether it's correct or not.
Yeah.
well, then the question then becomes why, let's just say let's just go on the idea of maybe they did know what Fullman had in mind to do with it. Why would they have approved it then?
Leftist agenda. Maybe they're on his side for that agenda for whatever
That's a
reason.
good possibility, Rick. That's a good. But if let's say these are,
Or he gave him
okay,
enough not.
let me get my point across. Let me get my point across here, Rick. Okay, let's say for a moment, right, that okay, so we're saying that the Anne Frank fund is basically the Frank estate, and let's say these are, descendants of Otto and Anne Frank and all that. Okay, you know that if anything, you would think that might be kind of disturbing, because thinking, trying to make your ancestor who suffered through the Holocaust, was a victim of the Holocaust, and then trying to minimize their experiences by just focusing in on whether or not they're lesbian. That says something about the family, as if this Fawn's foundation is still run by the family, if this is quote unquote the Frank estate and the Frank family, it seems if you think about it, I think some people might find this a little disturbing if you really think about it.
Yeah. Well, it's disturbing in the fact that they wouldn't care about their ancestors legacy, or maybe they think it's a good legacy, about the gay thing. But the other thing I was going to say, maybe he just threw enough money at them that they didn't care.
Yeah, that's a thought that crossed my mind too.
Well, I mean, if you look at the modern thing too, homosexuality is considered a higher form of oppression than even what would have been happening. So this would be an extra layer on top of that. So in the modern paradigm, this would be actually adding on to, not subtracting from.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
In other words, you think that because she was a budding lesbian, they would have thought that would have actually
It makes
made
it doubly
more.
worse to be in that situation from their perspective.
Yeah.
well, we forget that this person had a lot of time to kind of hide out in an attic and kind of write. So there are probably just a lot of random thoughts in there.
Yeah, well, I mean, even going back to what, like, how Rick kept bringing up earlier, it's a diary. I always just found it kind of weird that they publish her diary. Like, I get it for historically, you could say it's for good reasons because we don't really know what was going on through
Well,
the head of a lot of people. But the fact that the dad ever decided to publish his daughter's diary, even with the best intent, I always just found very weird.
Right. Well, yeah. Because from what I read on it, I don't know if I saw it in this article or if when I did some other research on Wikipedia on Anne Frank. As I understand it, the reason her father decided to publish the diary was to help his daughter fulfill a dream of being published. Apparently, she wanted to be a writer. She wanted to be published. But I'd have to take a pause on
Yeah,
a little bit because,
no, I get that.
like, even if that were true, even if she did want to become a writer and want to be published, I I absolutely don't think she'd want private thoughts, um, her private thoughts and feelings put out there
Published.
like that.
Yeah.
Hey, Jr.
Hey, Jr.
Well, yeah, her diary was also had a bunch of dirty jokes in it and various other subject matter.
The passages are true to the text, and Frank famously wrote a lot about her age, sexuality, even what does Justin Bieber writing about it have to do with
Oh,
it?
because he said that Anne Frank would have been a believer when he
Would
visited the Anne Frank Museum. That
have been
that
a
was a big
believer.
thing.
What's
A
believer
believer
in
are
what?
that Bieber fan base. That's what he calls the fan base. They're believers.
Oh, okay. Anyways, let's see. Um, okay, so let's continue on with the article here. Whether or not this is accurate, and Frank did develop lesbian attraction, the problem is that when somebody like Fullman produces the kind of material they admit is surreal and perverse, written in terms that would suit a leftist agenda as practiced today, that's why the whole graphic novel comes off as more of an embarrassment. Also, note how the JTA doesn't question whether the surreal ingredients are inappropriate given the real life subject material it's allegedly based on, and whether it comes off more as crude and vulgar than appropriate for children. I looked at some of the comments available so far on the article in their open web program, and people say, for example, and then I guess I guess this is one. So these are some of the schools have been pushing soft porn and quote unquote free love on high school kids since the late 60s, which is some people would argue the free love is true. I mean, we remember hearing about the counterculture. I had genitalia, and when I was a young girl too, but it was not something that was discussed in public. Um, there are such things as respect and discretion. That's one comment from, and then somebody want to say something?
No.
And then Indeed, I would think that Anne Frank would be utterly mortified to know such passages were made public. Just because she wrote it down doesn't mean she meant the world at large to read it. It's a loss of dignity for someone who had everything else taken away. Again, good point. It's one of the
Yeah.
points I really was kind of trying to get at.
And she never really lived through all that, so we would never know what kind of person she was going to grow up to be anyway.
Yeah. JR saying here, her musings on her sexuality are often commented on for decades. And also, I assume that she would not have wanted any of it made public. I think we all would generally agree. A young girl's diary is something very personal and private. The way Fulman and Polanski made use of it is unforgivable. Mm-hmm. And then going back to Avi Green here, this is him talking now. From what's been explained about it by better sources, it does sound pretty forced, and that's the problem. A writer at the American Thinker, who's a member of Moms for Liberty, made some vital points. What's really going on and why this graphic novel ends up okay, I think it should say it, not is. That's a typo, I think. Ends up disrespecting Frank's memory. Yeah, it's like taking the plight of a girl who, again, was in hiding, fearing for her life that she'd be killed for being Jewish, and basically just from almost a reputational standpoint, ARPing her. Now this is the person from American Thinker talking now. At my blog, I've written about the way in which the left is co-opting Anne Frank for its own ends. This post sums up what the left has been doing to Anne Frank's legacy, which is to erase her Jewishness and attack Israel, which is something I've noted too a few times. In parentheses here, had Anne Frank and her family made it to British mandate Palestine, the only true refuge in the world for Jews, they would have survived World War II. The latest use to which leftists have put Anne Frank is to place her in the service of the gay pride movement. So this is what I was referring to earlier when I was saying they were basically trying to minimize her Jewish heritage and promote and quote unquote promote like a gay heritage, for lack of a better way of saying it. Thus, in Anne Frank's diary, the graphic adaptation, some illustrations focus on Anne's nascent sexuality, providing truly graphic images of Anne viewing sexually explicit nude statues or focusing on her appreciation of the nude female body. These concepts were in Anne's unexpurgated diary, which I'm guessing means unedited, but they were also the ruminations of a precocious young woman from a European progressive household by the standards of the day. That's another thing too. She was in terms of she was more Jewish from a cultural standpoint as opposed to a religious standpoint, because it's often been said that they were a progressive Jewish family.
Also, in this diary, how old is Anne Frank?
From what I understand, she's anywhere. She basically, I think, she was born in 1929. I think she got the diary maybe in late 41 or 42. So she was about 11, 12, maybe at the oldest 13, and had basically been writing it, up until the day she got arrested. because they found
Number one reason why that graphic adaptation is inappropriate.
what was that? What was that, Tim?
I said that should be the number one reason why it was also inappropriate.
Because she was basically 11,
A
12,
minor.
13 years old.
Yeah, and they're making a graphic novel about it. It's pretty effed up.
Yeah, I mean, what would you there's a pair of initials that come to mind on that. I wonder if you guys would agree with that. Would you argue the way they're making it maybe making it sound, oh, I don't know, CP? Would you guys agree with that? The way they're trying to
I don't know if I would jump that far, but I mean, it is kind
Borderline.
of gross. It's
Border-
definitely gross. I could tell you that, but
I'd say
Yeah.
it's pretty borderline.
well, even I think I don't know, it was Avio, one of the guys he was quoting from here, but even they had argued that it was marginally pornographic. So,
but you probably shouldn't take my word. I thought just publishing the diary at all was kind of gross on behalf of the person who wrote it. Again, very personal
well,
thoughts.
again,
Yeah.
and as I understand it, the father was the one who decided to have it published. You know, his belief was he wanted to make
He wanted his daughter
to be published.
published, yeah,
Yeah.
because she wanted to be a writer at the time that she died.
Albeit maybe due to grief or what have you, maybe he didn't really think it through as well as he should have. But who clearly wrote her diary with an eye to future publication and was experimenting with idea. So wait, okay. Some illustrations focus on Anne's nascent sexuality, providing truly graphic images and viewing sexually explicit nude statues and focusing on her appreciation of the nude female body. These concepts were in Anne's unexpurgated diary, but they were also the ruminations of a precocious young woman from a European progressive household, in parentheses by the standards of the day, who clearly wrote her diary with an eye to future publication and was experimenting with the ideas. By that, okay, I had to read that again to try to get the context of what they were saying. She again going back to that idea that the reason her father had it published was not necessarily that she was going to publish her diary, but she wanted to be a writer and was using her diary as a way to develop her writing skills.
Yeah.
So I had to read that again because I had to it's like a double take. But anyways, Moms for Liberty, in parentheses, a group to which I belong in South Carolina, so this is still the American Thinker writer talking, wasn't protesting Anne Frank or her diary. The organization and its members were protesting the graphic novelization of the diary that is a cherry-picked rendition that used some of Anne's words and provided illustrations from the imaginations of Ari Fullman and David Polensky. So think about that for a moment.
Yeah.
Think about that for a moment. If let's just say that is true, the imagination. Think about that. That's got to be messed up. The imaginations of Ari Fullman and David Polanski. What does that kind of suggest to you? You guys want to say it or no?
No.
Maybe they're the problem, right?
Yeah.
Indeed, when you go to the Amazon page for the book, Anne Frank is designated not as the book's author, but as a quote unquote contributor. So let's see.
Well, that has to be by default, right? Because anytime you adapt something, there has to be some type of, even if you try to make it one-to-one, which they clearly weren't. I'm not arguing they were. But even when you try to make something one-to-one, as an adaptation, you are changing something just by the act of adapting it. You even see those in the movies where it'll be like based on the story of blank. No matter how close it is, you can only ever be a contributor to an adaptation, unless you are the same person adapting it that wrote the original piece.
Right. This is a comic book, not Anne Frank's diary. And Hart has acknowledged that it's edgy, quote unquote. Now, that was the American thinker. Now we're back to Avi Green here. I recall that Fullman and maybe Polanski, too, also did an animated film 2 years back titled, quote unquote, Where is Anne Frank? Which appears to have fishy content as this movie marker review signals. So now we're going into the passage they took from the movie marker. There are concerns about whether the combination of animation and magic realism is the most suitable medium to convey the emotional turmoil of a historical figure. Again, something I think we'd all kind of agree with.
I'll be right back. I want to grab something to drink.
Through Heart to Heart with Kitty, Anne pours her heart about her frustration with the war, not to mention the horror experienced by Jews. Amid her growing annoyance, she paints an idealist picture of her life where boys are infatuated with her, and screen legends such as Clark Gable lead a charge against the Nazis. There are times Frank comes across as bratish, but her annoyance highlights a lack of fear in her voice, so her trepidation occasionally feels unjustified. It is possible that she is hiding her fears from Kitty to convey a simpler, idealistic world full of imagination and color, which further supports the film's fantastic narrative around the imaginary figure that subsequently steers the limelight away from Frank's legacy. In fact, Where is Anne Frank does not provide enough context about Frank's significance. Throughout the film, Kitty sees landmarks, streets, and museums, and even a statue named and dedicated to Frank. But the film doesn't exactly say why she is famous. In Kitty's eyes, she doesn't see a famous figure. All she sees is her friend and her only link to the world. So, upon watching a play about Anne, she is understandably protective of her friend's integrity and especially her diary. Fullman tries to address this through Kitty's growing involvement with illegal immigrants as she sees that their struggles echo those experienced by Anne. However, this eventually caves into uninspiring cliche, not to mention half-baked conclusion. So this animated film, as it were, is not necessarily about Anne Frank, it's more about Kitty, but also, and they're going to say something here in the next paragraph. Yeah, this is Avi talking again, Avi Green talking again. So what's this? Did Fullman exploit the material for a modern-day allusion to illegal immigration, which is not the same as persecuted refugees? Will it turn out he also condones Islamo-fascist flooding Europe at the expense of all innocents and ignores deliberately or otherwise Islam's connections with National Socialists during World War II? According to this page, the film was done in partnership with UNESCO, a division of a global outfit that's hugely anti-Israel. And that's telling quite a bit, too. Also, it's quote-unquote magic realism suitable for this kind of product? Hardly. And to think Fullman would also pander to LGBT ideology in the graphic novel. He co-authored with Polanski. There have regrettably been all sorts of such movements that have tried to hijack and appropriate other people's tragedies to suit their own warped beliefs and agendas, and it's done far more harm than good. It's hugely disappointing. Well, what do you guys think of that? Based on what we're seeing here in this article here, would you say that is what's going on? Would you say that?
It would seem like it, for sure.
In the end, what's really grating about Fullman's projects is that he sounds like the kind of person who's overly obsessed with Frank to the point he'd run the gauntlet of desecrating her memory for the sake of pandering to love. Yeah, I have a feeling that he want to discredit. Well, I get the feeling based on what we've heard about this guy, he probably wants to desecrate more than her memory, if you get what I mean.
Yeah.
And it goes without saying, men like him never seem to care about the plight of Jews in Islam-led countries in the past. And if such leftists are going to be so selective about what issues they take up, is it any wonder they're unsuited to deal with the topics they already are? So that's the end of the article right there.
Yeah.
But overall, what did you guys take away from all that?
It's not surprising that they would take something and twist it to their own. I mean, the people on the left don't care about anybody but their own selves.
Yeah, they don't care about truth or reality.
They don't even care about the people the group of people they claim to be standing up for.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's just more noise, right?
Yeah.
It's lip
Hey,
service.
you've been pretty quiet throughout all this. Anything you want to add?
Lip service.
Oh yeah. I've just been running around going through my boxes, burning any of my old private writings so nobody can publish it on me after my death.
Yeah.
I was gonna say.
Yeah, you have private writings?
Plenty.
I was going to.
Are they I don't think would they be that interesting for people to make a movie out of?
Well, actually, correction. I had private writings.
Well, yeah. Again.
Never mind.
Oh, I'm sorry, Tim. Go ahead.
I forgot what I was going to say now.
Couldn't have been that important then. No. Kid.
Well, as I said, one of my biggest issue with this whole thing was more the fact that these people were focusing consider again, going back to what I said earlier, considering the time she was in, considering the circumstances she was in, whether or not she was a budding lesbian, I don't really think she would have been thinking a whole lot about, especially from what we were talking about earlier with the fact she was basically 11, 12, 13-year-old girl writing at this time. And I think Tim said it best when he said this shouldn't have been published in the first place for that reason alone.
Yeah. Well, I do think maybe her like you said, she's a 13-year-old girl or a 12-year-old girl. Her womanhood might be on her mind a little bit, even in her situation. But,
I don't think it's as prevalent as these people, though, are trying to make it.
Yeah. She never grew up, so we don't know anything about her real feelings. It's, attractiveness to somebody can be any different ways, can be interpreted, talking about your own genitalia doesn't make you straight, queer, anything. You're just talking about your genitalia. That's all it is,
Yeah, it's like I mean, okay. Have you guys ever seen the movie Kindergarten Cop with Arnold Schwarzenegger?
Yeah.
Now, you remember that one scene where the little boy stands up and says, "Mr. Kimbo, boys have a penis, girls have a vagina," and the kids all start laughing. What they did to Anne Frank here with these writers, R.E. Fullman and David Polanski, were doing to Anne Frank would have been like saying, would have been like them trying to say to that kid for saying that was a hermaphrodite
or a sex pervert.
Yeah, it's like but it's just good to show you.
If I want to be fair, right, to the original writing, not to this graphic novel, I think this is probably just trash. But to the original diary, I wouldn't be surprised if her sexuality was very, very prevalent and on her mind during that whole situation. And part of it is you can be in the worst situation possible, worried for your life, but younger people can't fully grasp it like the adults can. And especially with the hormones going through your body, you're kind of just like listening, right? You're obeying your parents and stuff, but the things that would normally be in your mind don't escape your mind, you know? So like I'm not surprised if even from the original version a lot of that was redacted and put back in. I just don't think that excuses the adaptation at all.
The graphic novel adaptation.
Yeah, I guess I was sort of trying to say something similar, so that it might have been on her mind. She's a 13-year-old kid or a 12-year-old kid.
Yeah, well, and they said Nathan. I mean, I just my feeling on it is what I was saying was it may have been on her mind, but I don't think it would have been quite as prevalent as, let's say, the writers of the graphic novel were trying to make it sound.
Yeah.
They're like okay, so if let's say we take it in a pie.
But even if these things were on her mind, we don't know in what way. Like we said, she says she's finds attracted to somebody. Is that friendship wise, romantically?
Well, yeah. I mean, my point to put it in a little bit easier context here by giving out numbers. It's like if let's say the actual number, the whole thing with taking into her age and all that. Let's say 10, 15, 20% of her thought process was on her budding sexuality. Okay. So let's say anywhere between 10 and 20%, just to, let's say that was the actual number. Okay. The way that Fullman and Polanski are trying to sell it, it would be more like, 40 to 60% of her thought process was on whether or not she was a buddy.
We don't even know the actual original passage.
Yeah, I mean,
how detailed was it? Was it like a blurb? Was it a paragraph? What?
Well, again, I think part of the problem too is that because they translated it. They originally published it in Dutch.
Yeah, which it was probably written in
the English translation came out in
52.
52. Where some people say that the redacted passages were reinserted.
Yeah.
But again, we may not know the full context.
But
trying to read the original, or at least read the original edit.
There's a few things I guess this really comes down to. Was the reason good enough for it to be taken at a library? A library in a school. I say yeah. You don't want too sexually explicit stuff in schools, especially whether it's just written or especially if it's visual.
Mm-hmm.
And then they said also it was downplaying the Holocaust.
Mm-hmm.
So there's
again I would say that graphic novel, if you are gonna 17 youngest probably should with parents' consent probably should be allowed to read. Anybody younger than 17, no.
Yeah.
Obviously, if they had that graphic novel, let's say in middle school, elementary school, yeah, hell no, get that thing out of those schools. High school libraries, maybe again, yeah, juniors or seniors or some people definitely 18 should be able to have access to it. But then again, but it
Well,
probably
if you put it in a high school library, every kid there has access to it, and that's basically 14 and up.
yeah, but yeah, good point there, Rick. Good point. But basically, the graphic novel. I think we all agree that the graphic novelization there it should not be in schools. I think that's
Yeah.
generally.
And then that was, I think, the main thing about this article was supposed to be, although it went into these other couple of guys who are leftists who have made, well, the one guy that's made Anne Frank's Mission, he has some sort of obsession over her.
Yeah.
And just saying that.
Which again, kind of, I would think that if there are people in his life who have kids, but then again, for all we know, the crowd he hangs out with, they probably, it's like, I would think that parents would not want any of their kids anywhere close to this guy, based on what we see here.
Yeah.
But then again, in the circles he runs with, the parents probably don't care or probably agree with him anyways. They probably make part of the problem as him.
Yeah, but they may agree with him or something to that effect. But when it comes to your own kids, usually if something like somebody like or what we think this guy might be, you still
rules for thee, but not for me.
Yeah. It's like usually they don't even want their kids around somebody that would harm them in that particular way.
Mm-hmm.
But it's also 10 o'clock, so I'm not sure whether we've been.
Yeah, I think it's a good time to start winding down a bit here. But how did you guys like the discussion tonight?
It was all right.
Oh, it was okay, depending how often I could talk without
getting interrupted.
Yes, Rick's the interrupter.
Well, I'm sorry. We all talk over each other. We're all
I know.
talking.
Well, sometimes in more, let's say, more controversial type discussions like this, it's very easy to talk because everybody's got something they got to say about it. It's like we're all talking over each other.
Yeah, you just go to talk at the same time, and the net's the net where you're delayed and you don't realize somebody's talking till after you've said like.
None of you remember that character? None of you remember the interrupter on the Conan O'Brien show?
No.
Oh my God!
At least not me.
I remember.
Yeah, it's me, the interrupter. What are you doing here? Why don't you leave? Don't you want friends?
All right. Well, we'll start to wind down a bit because we're at the 2-hour mark already. So today is, of course, April 16th, 2023. Going to take a look back at this weekend in each history. But what I can tell you right now is actually everything I found today for this weekend in each history. Well, one of them can kind of reflect yesterday and today, but everything more or less is coming from yesterday. So let me just remind myself a few things here. 53. All right. So without any further ado, let's go ahead and take a look back at this weekend in each history. History! So first off, we're going to head back 80 years ago. And on this date, or on yesterday's date rather, 80 years ago yesterday,
That's a really long time ago, fella, sonny.
Yes, it is. On this date, 80 years ago today, the 60th issue of Super Comics from Dell went on sale on this date back in 1943 from Dell, which was at the time known as KK Publications Incorporated. It was a monthly title that sold for 10 cents, and it was 64 pages. And if you got, in case you guys can't tell, the guy on the cover there, that's Dick Tracy. And of course, even up to this point, they were still probably doing Dick Tracy reprints in this comic at this point as well. So, and we're back in 1939, of course. Now, this is, of course, 4 years after from the point where we're at right now. But on this date, on yesterday's date, 80 years ago, the 60th issue of Super Comics went on sale.
Well, isn't that just super?
I guess it is, Rick. And 1943 is just so nice that we're gonna hit it twice. And also on yesterday's date in 1943, 80 years ago yesterday, in Japan, the anime movie Kumo to Tulip, which translated as Spider and Tulip, was a short animated Japanese film media in 1943 from by Kenzo Masaoka. The story is about a ladybug being chased by a black-faced spider. The spider catches a ladybug, but then it rains. The spider drowns, and the ladybug is freed by a friendly fly.
The spider returns from the dead and seeks revenge.
Yeah. Let's see. So the film was produced in 1943 under the direction of Kenzo Masaoka by Chochiku Doga Kenkyujo. It was released on this date. So back in 1943, the anime film, I don't even know if it was even called anime yet, but Kumo to Tulip, or Spider and Tulip, premiered in Japanese theaters on this date back in 1942. Or 1943 rather. Or yesterday's date in 1943.
Well, I just gotta ask one question. Is 1943 nice because it didn't hit you back after you've hit it twice?
No, that's just a saying I came up with when I have two items that are
Yeah,
like.
I know. I'm joking.
Yeah. In fact, I even have an extension if I have three.
Yeah.
It's not. 1943 is just so nice that we're gonna hit it twice, and it's not just It's not just nice twice, but we're gonna hit it thrice. You know what the word thrice means?
3.
Right. So, anyways, but that, of course, it was just twice. So, anyways,
Yeah.
moving on now to the next piece in each history, as on this day in 1953. Well, yesterday. Well, yes, depending upon when this actually happened. So during the 2 weeks between April 15th and 29th was the 1953 Cannes Film Festival. And during the opening ceremonies, which I would imagine would probably have been on the 15th, which would have been yesterday, so 70 years ago yesterday, Walt Disney receives the Legion of Honor during the opening ceremony from the Cannes Film Festival. So on 70 years ago this weekend, Cannes Film Festival. So
Cool.
I'm guessing Legion of Honor was probably like some kind of lifetime appreciation award or something like that. So, anyways, now getting ready for the final piece of niche history from yesterday. on yesterday's date about 10 years ago. 10 years ago yesterday. 10 years ago yesterday, from the Bilo Center in Greenville, South Carolina, WWE held its Monday Night Raw Super Show on that date 10 years ago. The event saw, let's see, the main event saw Nikki Bella with her sister Brie in a corner defeat Caitlyn. Jack Swagger defeated Dolph Ziggler. Let's see. Kofi Kingston would become the United States champion by defeating Antonio Cesaro, who's now, of course, goes back going by his real name of Claudio Castagnoli in AEW now. And to open up the show, Randy Orton and Sheamus defeated the Big Show in a 2-on-1 handicap match. So that happened 10 years ago today. WWE Monday Night Raw. So with that, I thank everybody for being here tonight. How did you guys like the show tonight?
It was good.
It was okay.
I know, Tim, you actually missed Rick's commentary on Friday's show, on his experiences with Friday's show, so you might want to go back and check that out. But with that, guys, I thank you guys for being here. I hope everybody enjoyed what we talked about tonight and got some good information out of it. We'll be back here, of course, tomorrow night with the Niche News, going over articles, and of course this Friday I have Terry from Mighty Studios joining me, as we'll be continuing our look through October of 1939 in comics history. We'll be focusing in on Marvel Comics. Now, in a rare instance, we will be going back to Marvel Comics #1 from the previous month to read the origin of Kazar, but then after that, we'll be spending the rest of the time in Marvel Mystery Comics #2, and we'll be looking at the first issue of Daring Comics, I believe. So I might want to check that out. And with that, guys, I thank everybody for being here, and I will see you all tomorrow. Bye.
It's only a day away.